Marcus had always thought he would remember the town the way postcards promised it. Bright storefronts, the river reflecting summer like a secret, the old high school bleachers painted the same familiar green. But the memory that rose first when the bus finally slowed into view was smaller and sharper. Cracked sidewalk by the corner where he and Walt used to race bikes, and the air that smelled like cut grass and someone's barbecue sauce lingering too long. He stepped off with a backpack that had been packed a dozen times in the last month, not because the trip needed so much attention, but because he couldn't decide how much of himself he was bringing. The letter he'd gotten from the hospital made everything else feel unreal. A single date. A single line that said his uncle needed someone to sign paperwork. A single phone call from an aunt who sounded like she'd already been crying for hours. Marcus told himself he was coming home to do a task. That was all. He'd been good at tasks all his life. Work contracts, deadlines, careful responses that didn't leave room for feelings to spill out. He turned at the station, scanning for a familiar face, and saw no one he recognized until a woman stepped closer with a paper cup of coffee and an expression that held worry like a permanent accessory. Renata's smile came first, quick and cautious, like she was testing whether it was safe. "Marcus?" she asked, and he felt his body answer before his mind did. He knew that voice. He knew it from summers when the town felt bigger than it was, from nights when laughter made everything else bearable. Renata had been a constant in his orbit, the friend of a friend, the person who always remembered birthdays, the one who had sat through chorus rehearsals when half the boys were too cool to stay. "Renata," he said, and the name broke something loose in his chest. Her hair looked different, more auburn and a little sharper around the edges, like she'd learned to survive on her own. Her eyes, though, were the same green, steady, and too kind to be ignored. "I wasn't sure you were actually coming," she said, glancing toward the bus station entrance, as if she expected someone else to appear with him. "I didn't know either," Marcus admitted, because he was tired of lying to people and calling it professionalism. Renata tipped her coffee cup slightly. "Well, you picked a terrible weekend." He laughed without humor. "I noticed." That was how the day began, not with romance, not with miracle, with the kind of bittersweet truth that sounded ordinary until it landed. Renata led him to the parking lot where she'd left her car. The late afternoon light was honeyed and forgiving, but the sky carried a restless gray at the edges. Marcus buckled his seatbelt and watched the familiar streets slip past the windshield. "You're staying with your aunt?" Renata asked. "Yeah," he said, "just until it's over," she finished gently. Marcus looked down at his hands, noticing how the knuckles felt tight. He hadn't realized he was bracing for pain like it was a blow that couldn't be dodged. Renata slowed at the red light and took a breath that looked too practiced. "Walt's here." Marcus turned his head sharply. "Walt?" Renata nodded, eyes flicking to him and back to the road. "He moved back to take care of his mom. He's been trying to keep things together." Marcus's mouth went dry. Walt had been the first person he'd loved in the quiet way that doesn't have a name yet. Their childhood friendship had lived in the spaces between things, after-school walks, scraped knees, shared jokes in the back row of the old gym. When Marcus started noticing the way Walt looked at him during football practice, it had felt like a secret that made his heart stutter. Then life had happened. College, distance, the hard work of pretending his feelings were just nostalgia. Their last conversation before years of silence had been casual, like they'd never shared afternoons that made the rest of the world fade. "Do you know where he is?" Marcus asked, and even to him it sounded too desperate. Renata hesitated. He's at the diner on Main. Her voice softened. He asked me not to tell you, but I think he's expecting you to show up anyway. Marcus swallowed. He doesn't know I'm here. I don't know what he knows, Renata said. I just know both of you have always been bad at timing. The diner sat in the middle of town like it had never learned how to be anything but itself. Warm lights spilled from the windows. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and buttered toast and something sweet on a griddle that made the place feel safe even when it wasn't. Marcus pushed through the door, and the bell above it rang once, bright and brief. He scanned the booths. His eyes landed at the counter first, because you always remembered where the person used to sit, whether you meant to or not. Walt was there. Not the boy from his memory, grown into a man with shoulders that held weight differently, hair a little more tousled than he used to keep it, jaw clean but with a shadow that suggested he'd stopped trying to impress the mirror. His hands were around a mug like it was the only thing steady in his world. Marcus stopped just inside the threshold. The room blurred at the edges. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Then Walt lifted his head. Their eyes met, and Marcus felt the years collapse in on themselves. Every almost, every unsaid thing, the way they'd been each other's safest person before they'd learned safety could hurt. Walt's expression tightened first, like he was bracing. Then recognition softened it. He stood slowly, chair scraping against the floor. Marcus, Walt said. It was only a name, but it carried everything. The hope that had survived years, and the fear that had all been a mistake. Marcus took one step forward. Walt. Renata had stepped back slightly, giving them space like she'd learned to do. Marcus could feel her presence at his side even when her body wasn't touching him. Walt looked at Marcus like he was checking for injuries, though his hands stayed at his sides. You made it. Yeah, Marcus managed. You... He stopped because whatever question he started felt wrong. What do you say to someone when the timing is terrible and the heart is still stubborn? Walt's eyes flickered toward Renata, then back. I didn't know you were coming home. I just got here. Marcus forced a breath into his chest. I'm handling something with my uncle. Walt nodded like he understood more than the sentence offered. His voice grew quiet. I'm here for my mom. The words sat between them, heavy and honest. Renata took a small step forward. You two catch up, okay? She said softly. I'll get you food before you talk yourselves into starving. Marcus watched her move toward the waitress, and suddenly the room felt smaller, as if the diner had been built to hold their old history. Walt gestured toward the booth. Do you want to sit? Marcus nodded, but his body moved slower than his mind. When he slid into the booth, his legs didn't know where to place themselves. He sat like someone bracing for impact. Walt sat opposite him, hands folded, gaze steady. They looked at each other too long. In the silence, Marcus heard the clatter of plates, the low conversation of strangers, the hiss of the coffee machine. Life kept happening. That was the cruelest part. What's it like? Walt asked finally. Marcus blinked. What's what like? Leaving, Walt said. Living somewhere else. Building a life. Marcus tried to answer with something safe, something that sounded normal. It's different, he said. There's good. There's also a lot of loneliness you don't notice until you stop moving. Walt's mouth tightened. I know that feeling. Marcus searched Walt's face. In his memory, Walt had always been the one who seemed unbreakable, the one who joked when it mattered, the one who never talked about fear. Now there was a new kind of tension around Walt's eyes, like he'd been carrying a storm in his skull for weeks. Is she okay? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer would be complicated. Walt's gaze dropped to his hands. She's in and out. Some days she knows me, some days she looks through me like I'm a door she can't open. Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to reach across the table, but he didn't. He remembered all the ways he'd hurt people by reaching for feelings he wasn't brave enough to name. Renata told me, Marcus said, and the words felt like he was trespassing into someone else's grief. Walt looked up. She tells you a lot. She cares, Marcus said. Walt gave a small, tired smile. Yeah. He paused. I didn't call you because I didn't know how to, and because I thought you'd be happier with the distance. The sentence hit Marcus in a place that had been sealed with years of denial. I didn't know how to be happy, Marcus replied, too honestly. Walt's expression softened, then sharpened, as if Walt was fighting himself. You look like you're trying to outrun something. Marcus laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that didn't help anyone. Maybe I am. Before he could say more, the waitress arrived with menus and 2 slices of pie that smelled like cinnamon. Renata had requested them, and Marcus understood suddenly that she'd been trying to give them something cheerful to hold. Order whatever you want, she said, placing the plates down with a firmness that looked like love. Walt glanced at Marcus, then at the pie. I'm not hungry. Renata didn't let it go. You are. You're just pretending you're not. Walt sighed, but he picked up his fork. The first bite seemed to surprise him, his shoulders dropping a fraction as if his body remembered what comfort tasted like. Marcus ate too, slowly. He told himself he was only eating because Renata had brought food, but he knew he was also eating because it gave him an excuse not to say everything he felt. They ate in uneasy harmony, not awkward, but cautious. Every so often their hands would reach for the same sugar packet and stop short, like contact was a line they weren't sure they were allowed to cross. After a while, Walt set his fork down, his eyes fixed on Marcus's face. You still draw? He asked. Marcus blinked. What? You used to sketch on the back of homework. Always these landscapes. Walt's voice turned gentle. Like you were trying to capture somewhere you could breathe. Marcus felt his heart trip over the memory. He hadn't drawn in years, not because he stopped wanting it, but because he stopped giving himself permission. I stopped when I moved, he admitted. I told myself it was because I was busy. Walt leaned back. I always thought you were the busiest person in the world, but still you made time for small things. Marcus stared at the tabletop. The diner's wood grain looked almost like a map. Why did you come back? Marcus asked, and this time he meant it. Walt took a long breath. Because my mom is getting worse. Because guilt is a loud teacher. Marcus felt something bitter flare. And because you needed to be close to your past. Walt's eyes moved to his. Yeah. Marcus heard how the word sounded like admission, and he didn't know which emotion was more dangerous, hope or regret. Renata watched them from the end of the booth, her face calm but her eyes sharp with understanding. She didn't interrupt. She'd learned when silence helped more than advice. When Renata excused herself to check on the waitress, Marcus and Walt were alone. Walt's voice lowered. "Are you okay?" Marcus almost answered yes by habit, but something about seeing Walt again made it impossible to keep lying. "I'm not," he said, the truth slipping out like it had been waiting years to be released. "I came home because I didn't want to handle it alone. But I keep thinking I should have stayed away longer." Walt's gaze held his. "Because of what we were?" Marcus flinched without meaning to. Walt looked like he'd been punched. Then he nodded like he understood the instinct. "I'm not trying to put you on the spot," Walt said quietly. I don't want you to carry it like a secret again." Marcus's chest tightened. "We didn't have secrets," he said, and the denial sounded weak even as he spoke. Walt gave a soft, sad laugh. "We did." Marcus stared at him. "We were kids." "Yeah," Walt replied, and the word carried a tenderness that hurt. "And kids feel things like they're forever." Marcus swallowed. The diner's warmth suddenly felt like it couldn't protect him. "I thought I was over it," Marcus confessed. "I thought I could be the kind of man everyone expects. I did everything right. School, work, a life that looks fine." Walt's face didn't judge. It listened. "And then," Marcus continued, "I realized I was living beside my feelings instead of inside them. Like I kept setting up a room and never opening the door." Walt's hands tightened around the edge of the table. "How did it change?" Marcus hesitated. He didn't know how to tell the story without making Walt responsible for the hurt. "You ever hear something in your head that you can't stop repeating?" Marcus asked. Walt nodded, eyes careful. "Mine was that I didn't deserve what I wanted," Marcus said. "So I wanted nothing. Or I tried to." Walt breathed out slowly. "Do you still believe it?" Marcus shook his head. "No." Walt's shoulders loosened like he'd been holding his breath for years. But then his expression changed. Fear returned, sharper now. "If you're not over it," Walt said, "I need to tell you something. I don't want you to—" Marcus waited. "I came out to my mom," Walt said, "not a long time ago." Marcus's heart stopped for half a second. "And?" Walt's eyes glistened but didn't spill. "She didn't respond the way I hoped. She asked questions. She got quiet. Then she got mean." Marcus's hands went cold. "I'm sorry." "Don't," Walt said quickly, as if Marcus's sympathy was another kind of pain. "She's sick. It's not fair to put it all on her, and it's not fair to pretend she didn't hurt me." Marcus nodded because he understood injustice when love still existed. "She's different now," Walt went on. "Sometimes she smiles at me like she remembers the boy she used to tuck into bed. Sometimes she doesn't. And I keep thinking I should have done better." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "You did what you could with what you knew." Walt's gaze flicked to Marcus's mouth, then back to his eyes. "Maybe." The air between them became charged, not with heat but with something fragile and alive. Marcus noticed that his fingers were resting close to Walt's, not touching, close enough that even a minor movement could change everything. Walt looked down at that gap like he was thinking about crossing it. Marcus didn't move. He could feel how both of them were guarding themselves, not because they didn't care, but because caring had consequences. Then Renata returned, and the moment broke like a wave retreating. She set 2 glasses of water down, and her smile was sympathetic. "I talked to the nurse," she said. "Your aunt's waiting at the hospital. Marcus, they said they'll see you in an hour if you want to handle the paperwork." Marcus blinked. "What about Walt?" Renata's eyes shifted to Walt, and Marcus saw the calculation behind her kindness. "He has a meeting with social work. He's supposed to be there before evening." Marcus sat back, feeling the day tilt. "I can drive you," Marcus offered. Walt hesitated, and Marcus could read the conflict. Accepting help meant admitting need. "Okay," Walt said finally. They paid the bill together, hands almost brushing as they reached for the same card. Their fingers touched for a heartbeat, skin-to-skin contact so brief it could have been coincidence. Yet it still felt like a spark that didn't know how to be small. Outside, the evening air had cooled. The town looked the way it always had in Marcus's mind, but now he felt like he was witnessing it through glass. Walt moved toward the passenger side of Marcus's car. He lingered on the sidewalk, staring at the diner's lit window as if he could memorize it. Marcus got behind the wheel, heart pounding. "We don't have to talk the whole way," Marcus said, because he couldn't handle the quiet without fear. Walt looked at him. "I want to," he answered simply. Marcus started the engine. As they drove toward the hospital, the streets passed in a familiar pattern. The mural on the side of the laundromat, the park where they used to sit on a wooden swing and pretend time was endless. Marcus's mind kept jumping to the same thought. If they'd only met in a different life, maybe the timing would have been kinder. But the conflict wasn't only external, it was internal. Both of them were arriving at love while still bleeding from something else. At a stoplight, Walt turned toward him. "You ever think about what you might have said back then?" he asked. Marcus's throat tightened. "All the time." "What would you have said?" Walt pressed. Marcus stared at the red light. Its reflection rippled across the windshield. "I would have told you I was scared," Marcus said, "and that I wanted you anyway." Walt's eyes softened like he'd been waiting for the exact truth. "I would have told you the same." The light turned green. Marcus drove forward, careful, like the road could punish sudden feelings. When they parked near the hospital, Marcus checked the rearview mirror and found Walt watching him again with a look that carried both hope and grief. It reminded Marcus of how Walt used to watch him from across a classroom, like he was always asking permission with his eyes. Renata walked them toward the entrance, her steps steady and purposeful. "You'll be okay," she said quietly to Marcus as they reached the automatic doors. Marcus nodded, but he didn't trust his voice. Walt looked at Renata. "Thanks for bringing us together." Renata's smile was tender. "I didn't bring you together. You did. I just kept the door from closing." Inside, fluorescent lights made everything look too white, too bare. Marcus signed papers with a hand that felt like it belonged to someone else. His aunt's grief moved through her like a constant weather system. When the nurse asked Marcus about his uncle's medical history, he answered with calm precision. But inside, he felt like his whole chest was a drum being struck by a slow, relentless rhythm. Later, in a small waiting area, Marcus sat with his aunt for a moment while Walt stood near a vending machine, staring at the rows of snacks as if choosing between them required courage. Marcus could see the tension in Walt's shoulders. He looked like someone trying not to fall apart. Marcus approached him. "You okay?" he asked. Walt turned, and for a second his face looked composed the way he used to be, like he could control feelings through effort. Then his eyes flickered to Marcus's mouth again, and the mask slipped. "No," Walt said. "I keep thinking I should have said something different to her, when I was sure she'd listen." Marcus sat beside him, close enough to share warmth. "You were human." Walt let out a breath that sounded like relief and sorrow mixed together. "I'm tired," he admitted. Marcus nodded. "Me too." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't demand words. Then Marcus said, almost reluctantly, "I thought I was done with this town." Walt's eyes stayed on the hallway. "And yet you came." Marcus swallowed. "I came because I couldn't do it alone." Walt looked at him. "That's not a small thing." Marcus's heart beat harder. He wanted to tell Walt that coming home had also brought back the part of him he'd been trying to hide. He wanted to say that Walt's presence made his old courage return, but courage, he knew, didn't arrive on command. So he offered a smaller truth. "Seeing you hurts," Marcus said. Walt's expression tightened. "Good hurt or bad hurt?" Marcus stared into the space between them. "Both." Walt's lips parted, and he looked like he wanted to laugh. Instead, his eyes glistened again. "I wish we'd had better timing," Walt whispered. Marcus leaned in just enough for his voice to carry only to him. "I don't know if timing ever gets better. I think we just—" He searched for the word that wouldn't sound dramatic. "We just keep choosing each other when we can." Walt's breath caught. Marcus felt the world tilt toward that choice. He reached out, slowly, giving Walt time to pull away. His fingers brushed the back of Walt's hand. Walt didn't move back. He turned his hand and, with trembling care, linked their fingers. It wasn't romantic in the movie way. It was romantic like a bruise being gently pressed to see if it still hurt. It was tender because it didn't rush. Marcus's eyes stung. He squeezed Walt's hand once, a quiet promise. Walt's thumb traced a small circle over Marcus's knuckles. "I thought I was going to lose you again," Walt said. Marcus blinked fast. "Not this time." Walt's gaze searched his face. "Are you sure?" Marcus exhaled. "I don't know, but I'm here, and I can't pretend I don't want this." For a moment, the hallway noise faded. It felt like the hospital itself was holding still to let them have a breath. Then Walt's phone buzzed. The sound shattered the intimacy like a bell. He glanced down, face shifting into concern. "What?" Marcus asked. Walt read the message and swallowed hard. "Social work called. They want me to come now." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Your mom?" Walt nodded. "I have to go." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to say he'd go with him, wanted to keep Walt's hand in his until the world stopped demanding answers. But the world didn't pause. Renata appeared a few minutes later, having stepped away to handle paperwork. She saw Marcus and Walt's linked hands and didn't ask questions. Her eyes softened, and she gave them a look that said, "Go. It's okay. Be human." Walt let go reluctantly. Marcus helped him stand, guiding him toward the exit with a steady hand at his elbow. Outside, the air was colder. Their fingers separated, but Marcus could still feel the shape of Walt's hand in his own. Walt got into his car. Before he pulled away, he leaned out the window. "Marcus," he said. Marcus stepped closer. "Yeah?" Walt swallowed and tried to keep his voice steady. If tonight is terrible, and it probably will be, come to the porch after. Just for a little. I want to show you something. Marcus blinked. What? Walt's expression turned shy and determined, like a boy about to ask for a dance again. I kept the sketchbook, the one you gave me, the one I didn't think you'd ever want back. Marcus's chest tightened. You kept it? Walt nodded. I didn't throw it away. Marcus felt the past rise like warmth through cold water. I'll come, Marcus promised. Walt's car pulled away toward the other side of town, and Marcus stood alone for a moment, hand empty and heart full. He returned to his aunt's room for the rest of the afternoon. His uncle's decline had made time feel urgent and cruel. When Marcus signed the final set of documents and watched his aunt's shoulders collapse, he felt like he was watching someone fold a life into smaller and smaller pieces. By evening, the hospital had drained the color out of his clothes. He walked back outside with Renata, the air smelling like wet pavement. You did good, Renata said quietly. Marcus shook his head. I don't feel good. Renata's eyes held his. You don't have to. You just have to keep breathing. Marcus almost laughed at the simplicity. It didn't fix anything, but it gave him something to hold. When he drove to Walt's mother's house later that night, the streetlights flickered with that old-town patience. The porch light was on, casting a warm circle on the steps. Walt was outside when Marcus arrived. He sat in a rocking chair, one leg crossed over the other. He looked more tired than earlier, his face drawn and his hands clasped like prayer. Marcus parked and stepped onto the porch. Walt looked up and relief moved through him so clearly Marcus felt it. You came, Walt said. Marcus nodded. You said to. Walt shifted in the chair, then reached inside a drawer and pulled out a worn sketchbook. The cover was faded from years of being handled and hidden, edges softened like something loved. Marcus's breath caught. You kept it, Marcus said again, because he needed to hear himself say it. Walt held the sketchbook out, but he didn't release it. His grip was firm, as if giving it back meant letting himself hope. I didn't know if you'd want it, Walt admitted. I thought you might feel embarrassed, like it was too obvious. Marcus stepped closer. It wasn't obvious to me, he said softly. It was only obvious to my heart. Walt's eyes shimmered. Then take it. Marcus took the sketchbook with both hands. The weight of it surprised him. It felt like holding a piece of their shared childhood. They sat side by side on the porch steps, the wood creaking quietly beneath them. Marcus opened the sketchbook slowly. Inside were the same landscapes he'd drawn back then, river bends, the town skyline from the hill, tiny details like the way light hit the windows in late afternoon. But between them were notes, small and careful, written in Walt's handwriting. His thumb traced the margin where Walt had written, You always see more than I do. Marcus turned a page and found another note. If you ever leave, I hope you take the parts of you that don't fit anywhere else. Marcus's eyes burned. Walt watched him from the corner of his vision, waiting. You wrote these, Marcus whispered. Walt nodded. I didn't think you'd read them. I kept adding little things when you weren't looking. Like if I said them through art, it wouldn't scare you. Marcus turned another page and found a sketch of Walt himself, unfinished but unmistakable. A boy on a bike at dusk, hair messy, face turned toward Marcus with a trust that felt innocent and terrifying. Marcus shut the sketchbook gently, like it could bruise. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it. Not because Walt had done anything wrong, but because Marcus had run. Walt leaned closer. "Don't be sorry." Marcus swallowed. "Then what do I do?" Walt's voice trembled with something he'd tried to keep locked away. "You stop leaving me behind. You stop acting like love is something you have to earn by suffering." Marcus felt tears slip silently down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them right away because he didn't want to pretend he wasn't moved. Walt reached out and rested his hand over Marcus's, fingers curling around his. Marcus inhaled slowly. "I don't know how to be brave," Marcus confessed. Walt's thumb rubbed over his knuckles. "You already are. You came home when you could have stayed gone. You told me the truth today." Marcus let out a shaky laugh. "I didn't tell you everything." Walt's eyes stayed steady. "Then tell me now, even if it's messy." Marcus stared at the porch light, at the way it made the night look softer than it deserved. "I'm scared," Marcus admitted. "I'm scared I'll want you and then something will happen. My aunt, your mom, life, and I'll lose you anyway. I'm scared we'll try and it'll be ruined by the world's timing." Walt's face softened. "We can be ruined by timing," he said carefully. "But we can also be shaped by it. Not ruined, shaped." Marcus looked at him. "Your love isn't a promise that nothing bad will happen," Walt continued. "It's a promise that you won't stop choosing me when it does." Marcus's chest tightened at the sincerity of it. He wanted to respond with grand words, something that would make it easy. But Marcus had always learned that the most honest things were usually simple. So he said, "Okay." Walt's breath caught, and then his forehead pressed gently against Marcus's shoulder. The touch was slow and careful, like Walt was asking the world to let them be safe for a moment. Marcus wrapped his arm around Walt's back. The contact grounded him. They stayed like that until the porch rocking made a small, steady rhythm beneath them. When Walt pulled back, their eyes met. Neither of them tried to pretend the situation was perfect. Their families were still hurting, still uncertain. The hospital calls wouldn't stop tomorrow. The grief wouldn't magically disappear. But what had changed was the way they were holding each other. Walt kissed Marcus's temple, light, tender, brief, then rested his lips just for a second longer than a gesture required. Marcus closed his eyes, letting himself feel it without turning it into a fantasy. It was real. It was here. After a while, Walt spoke again, voice softer. "Come stay for a bit tomorrow, if you can, even if it's just tea and sitting quietly." Marcus nodded. "I can do that." Walt's smile was small but genuine. "And Marcus?" Marcus looked at him. "Take care of yourself too," Walt said. "Your aunt isn't the only person you can save." Marcus's throat tightened. "What if I don't know how?" Walt's hand tightened around his. "Then we learn, together, one day at a time." Marcus felt something inside him unclench. The night stayed dark, but the warmth between them stayed steady. Later, when Marcus finally stood to leave, Walt helped him up as if it mattered. Marcus held the sketchbook close to his chest, like a promise that their past wasn't only painful, it was also proof of who they'd been capable of becoming. On the drive back, the town looked almost kinder. The familiar streets no longer felt like a test. They felt like a path. Marcus parked outside his aunt's house, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. He thought about the worst possible moment they'd met, and how it hadn't erased the good. It had simply made the good sharper. He thought about the way Walt had reached for his hand without demanding it. He thought about the note in the sketchbook. If you ever leave, I hope you take the parts of you that don't fit anywhere else. Marcus opened the sketchbook once more, just to feel the pages under his fingertips. Then he closed it and carried it inside. Renata was already awake in the kitchen, sipping tea. She looked up when Marcus walked in. "You okay?" she asked. Marcus nodded, and this time his voice wasn't careful. It was steadier. "I'm hopeful," he admitted. Renata's smile warmed his chest. "Good. Hope's a muscle. You've got to keep using it." Marcus leaned against the counter, letting himself believe that love could arrive at the same time grief did, and still be gentle, still be real. The next day would bring more calls and more paperwork and the same world that always moved too fast. But Marcus knew something now that he didn't know when he boarded the bus. He didn't have to do life alone. Not anymore. Not with Walt. Not with the kind of love that didn't erase the past, but made room for it to become a beginning.